So this session, I'm going to hand over to Katie Moorhen from 5283, and the session is setting standards across virtual events. So Katie, over to you and your panel.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Can everyone hear me okay? Hello? Thanks. Perfect. Thank you. Hello, welcome everybody to the session today, and thank you for joining us. It's very hard to start a session around virtual events and sound original. I don't want to talk about, the dreaded C word or the last 18 months because everybody in this room has lived it and breathed it. So I'm going to try and avoid that topic per se. But we're going to think about the future of what virtual events look like. But we're going to talk about data and actually coming together and a unified approach. So VCEF, for those who don't know, was launched earlier this year. And came from a concept from the team from Explory. So Explory are event specialists in benchmarking and insights, and from a number of organisers of founding platforms who decided that actually we wanted to know what the success of virtual events looked like. And to do that, wanted to create a universal data format. So rather than butcher this anymore, this explanation of what actually VCEF is, I thought what we would do is we'd talk to two people who actually were part of the founding partnership and where it came from and what it looks like. So I'm going to hand over. Barish, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone what your role is at VCEF?
Yeah, hi. I'm Barish Onay. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Precision Communities, which is a virtual-only organizer. And we work with GRIP and many other people to really look at the challenges around the data concerning virtual events. And VCEF came about when Mark Brewster, CEO of Explory, called me one day and said, hey, I got an idea and we need to talk. And we started talking. This was over a year ago. And we had looked at some pain points that came about with hosting lots of virtual shows. Because I used to be working at bigger corporate organizers, at Hive and at Tarsus as chief marketing and commercial officer roles. So that gave me, let's say, a snapshot of varying types of events of ours needing to use different platforms. Because there are a lot of platforms out there. Some of them are good for some type of events, the others are good for other types of events. There are a few that are good for most. So you end up using, if you're a corporate organizer that organizes more than one type of event, you end up using more than one platform. And what that creates is that then after your event is done, there's lots of engagement data that's built, which is fantastic to have because that's what we needed for a very long time in our industry. We didn't know what really went on in the event. And there were a lot of other technology organizers, providers that tried to give us a snapshot, but there was always an adoption problem. If a show was virtual, there isn't any adoption problem. You know what everybody is doing, they're connected to and everything. So that creates a lot of data that we wanted our hands on. But when you use more than one platform, you then need to have a data team behind you to make sense of it all, because you might have one brand using different platforms for different things. They might be doing a show, a real exhibition using platform A, then they might do a webinar and use platform B, and they might also try to do just a matchmaking event and use platform C, just one brand. Then to actually knit the whole experience together, what really happened from the point of view of the brand was super hard to do. So that was the core problem that we looked at. Then we started talking to a lot of organizers and saying, are you experiencing the same problem? And the result was a resounding yes. We did survey, I think, 20 top organizers. And the number that sticks in my head is per organizer, the average number of different platforms used was 4.3, so nearly 5. Yeah? So every organizer, actually big organizer, is looking at different platforms, and then the data export, if he exported in any shape or form, looks different from platform A to B to C to D.
So that was sort of 3.8 platforms across one single event, was it? Or
no, that was 4.3. I'm sorry. 4.3. Platforms used per organizer.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what that means is to fulfill the let's say value proposition to our client virtually, you need more than one solution. This was aimed at, the research was aimed at virtual platforms. But if you look at a wider scope, then you look at registration provider, then you look at marketing provider, this, that, then to make these systems speak to each other, you need to have one hell of a data team. They need to look at APIs or use Zapier or whatever. And that was the core of the problem, that the organizer cannot make sense out of this newly found trove of data about what's happening at the event. So that was a core problem we tried to tackle. And the solution we came up with is to create a format, a data exchange format, that we could build buy-in around from organizers and platforms alike. So we started getting people together in virtual rooms and talk about this, and what do we need to include in a version 1, how does it look, and us, the organizers, not being real techies, we went only so far before taking it to the platforms and asking, hey, we put something like this, how does it look? So after the first, let's say, knitting together of this data format, we took it to the platforms, and maybe Tim could talk about the experience about his teams being in those one-to-one meetings and us telling them, hey, we did this, how does it look, do you have any feedback? Oh, okay, we can change that. And we started sort of an iterative process of putting together a version 1 or version 0 of VSEF, which stands for Virtual Standard Export Format. So that's the story behind where we're coming from.
And Tim, GRIP have been very supportive of VSEF and part of its development. And how, from a platform point of view, tell us why you got involved and where you sit.
Yeah, it's very simple, right? Like we do, I think this year probably about 1,000 events, and a big part of those are virtual, but I think goes for any event really. And we've got a 4-person integration team and about 10 project managers that are all working really on the configuration and data across all these different systems. So that's a huge cost, and a part that I'd love to see being simplified. I don't believe that the solution is putting all and everything in an all-in-one platform, because all-in-one is the same as all-in-none. So the only solution is making sure that all these different technologies are much better at talking to each other. And that means that you need some form of standardization in order to simplify that process. Make sure that as a technology platform, you don't have to do every single kind of integration in kind of a huge range of different ways, but you can actually pull data in a reasonably standardized way from registration systems, for example, right? Like every single registration system will have data formats that are slightly different. So for me, VSEF is like much beyond kind of virtual events as such. I think it really is a standardized way of kind of platforms talking to each other and data being exchanged between them. And I think that's really what the potential is of what we're talking about here, because in the end, for us as a kind of company that focuses a lot on AI and making sure that we get more data into the platform to make sure we can deliver more personalized experiences, I see it as a way that I can actually give data more easily to other platforms that can then showcase, hey, GRIP is really good at this and this is where we can improve. For example, if it integrates with Explory, but equally it's a way for us to get data out of other sources to make sure that our personalization is even better inside the platform. So I really see it as a two-way street, and the more I can spend less time on data and standardizing it, and more time on actually innovating, that's what I love doing. So let's focus on that, and that's really what we're doing here.
I think what's quite interesting though is you mentioned time, and when you're running events, you'll know this, you don't have time to sit there for 6 months to analyze what happened. You need results pretty quickly so that you can act on them to improve within the next event. And with virtual events, obviously that's shortening because people are running more and more virtual events. Is that a big part of what you're doing as well, trying to sort of save time as well as being efficient, or is that just a positive byproduct?
I think it's just not just time, but effort as well. Because the thing is, the current market without VSEF creates, let's say, an entry barrier to the smaller players. Because the smaller players end up not having enough resources to really knit the whole picture together with a big data team of a Hive or a bigger company could do, or has access to. And I think VSEF is doing a few things at once, and one is, yes, taking less time to put software talking to each other, creating synergies, all that, but also democratizing data analytics. Because if platforms that you are using are VSIF compliant, they can talk to each other. And you can actually, you don't need extra resource to knit stuff together. So that's also a point that is important to us.
And unified data formats aren't a brand new, they work in other industries as well, don't they? I don't know if you've worked with them before on another, I think it's retail has, you know.
Automotive, retail, lots of industries have them.
Automotive, yeah.
And they are generally pushed by a big association or a professional body.
Yeah.
But there's a proliferation of acronyms in our industry. Lots of associations, so it's really hard to get one to back everything.
Yes.
And for that also we're engaging with a lot of associations. UFI is one of the founding members of VSEF, which has been great for us. CISO as well, and some other professional bodies. But it is important to create buy-in. And to do that, it's like solving a simultaneous equation. You need a lot of organizers to buy into it, as well as platforms and associations. So it's just like organizing events. You keep on telling the next person that they're all coming, then they'll end up coming in. So that's what we're doing in the VSEF sphere, and trying to convince a lot of people into this is good for all of us, because it actually is.
And actually, the initial launch, I think within sort of a couple of days, saw 120 downloads of the standards. So we know that it's something that it's not just a couple of people talking about it, in a meeting. It's a pain point across the industry, which is what your survey initially identified as well.
Yeah, we really think so. And the thing is, for us, just to make it clear to everyone, VSEF is a non-profit. VSEF is not a company. Yeah, VSEF is currently backed by Explore, but it will stand on its own 2 feet and become an open platform, an iterative open platform. It's open to feedback from everybody. And there will be iterations, and people are working on. I'm chairing the organizer group. There are other people chairing other groups to really create an inclusive, let's say, process for the future of this format that we just brought up.
Tim, talking about virtual event measurement generally, I mean, you said you've run a grip 1,000 events in the last year. How are event professionals or event organisers measuring the success generally of those virtual events, or is it kind of we've got to get something out the door and we're doing it, or have they got time for a thought process, and if there is, how are they measuring it?
That's a good question. I think that there is this graph on like the diminishing value of data, and the longer it takes in order to get it into right people's hands, the less value it has. And so I think that speed is just as important as what the information actually is, because you could have the most amazing dashboard, but if it takes you 6 months to generate it, then all the value is gone, no matter how good that dashboard is. So you really need to make sure that you make it very easy to generate that insight. And it starts like simple top of funnel stuff, being able to see everything from views to clicks to connections to meetings, and all the way down. So really present that to an exhibitor to say, okay, this is how many people viewed your company profile. This is how many people interacted with it. And being able to show that funnel and where people are coming from when they interact with an exhibitor, and then overlaying that with other data sources, right? Like how long did they spend on that session? What level of interaction was there? Like there's still so much potential. And I think that traditionally kind of technologies such as Grip have played more of a supporting role, right? Like the app is used right here, and so it's a kind of it's an enabler of a physical event. And I think what you see within virtual is that it is the predominant, it's the only way that people interact with that event experience, which therefore means that the requirements from an analytics point of view become much, much more intense. So, like we've built an entire new data team and data warehouse, and making sure we can do our own analytics tracking. Like we allow organizers to put like Google Analytics and all of those things onto the platform. But you just see that there is a desire to do so much more with data. And the other thing that you're seeing is that exhibitors, corporates, have been doing their own events, right? So they've seen online what they can get out of these platforms. So they're like, hey, if I exhibit at your event, I want to do the same thing. I want to get just as much insight. And so the requirements that are there are only going to increase. And if you look towards the future, and you look towards this kind of hybrid strategy of doing kind of physical and online events, there's only going to be more technology that is needed for an event organizer. The number of suppliers won't go down, it will only go up. You can look at any other industry, look at retail, look at any kind of thing that has gone from physical only to now being across kind of virtual and in person. It's only going to increase. So you need to find ways as a company that you can deal with this proliferation of data and turn it into value for your main customers, which are visitors and the experience that they have. Like I was talking to Crowd Connected, what is used kind of for on-site tracking to make sure that we know what kind of the walking paths are and how we can improve the experience from that. So it's like a visitor experience can be improved through better data collection and turn that into value. And of course the exhibitor really wants that insight and ideally have it flow in straight to their CRM system, right? So I think that's the next step. Can we make it so easy and so standardized that Zapier and Blender and all these other kind of integration layers adopt this standard as well, and then make it really straightforward for any exhibitor to just plug their data into their marketing automation and CRM systems. That's the next step. And then you really start making some incredible progress. So yeah, that's where I hope that we'll get to.
And the value there then becomes a no-brainer. Events, live, virtual, they become a no-brainer for our clients and customers. I mean, Baris, you've been at the forefront of digital innovation in the events world for a long time. Virtual events aren't new. Obviously, there's been an increasing adoption for various obvious reasons. But do you see, what's down the pipeline? Do you think for virtual events? What's coming up? What's next? Maybe that's a tricky question.
Well, a really specific question. So the thing is, when we look into the future, we always look through the lens of today, what's available today, and that's what fools us. Because there's always a technology that we don't see that comes in and changes something. But that technology is currently presenting itself. I can take your question, is like, are we looking at the next 2 years, or 5 or 10? Because as you go further down the line, I think the metaverse will be a big thing. It's coming. And I have tested some solutions. It's incredible. This sense of co-presence now people can provide. So that is something incredible coming our way, but it's not for the coming few, let's say, years perhaps. But on that scale of things, that being the, let's say, big white elephant out there, we don't know what's going to happen with it. But in the closer, let's say, forecast, I think we need to sort out what hybrid really is. Is it sequential hybrid or real-time hybrid? What is hybrid? It's a big question, I know. But the thing is, I was on my way today, coming here to deliver the speech, and from the overground, I was just checking a session and then looking at some profiles, talking to people. Then I'm here now, and I'm gonna get out and perhaps still continue talking to people. And this is now, if we looked at this pre-2019, it would be a pipe dream. Yeah, we wouldn't spend money on this. It's nice to have, but do we really want that? No. We wouldn't. But now this is the absolute must. This is where you start from. Yeah. So basically, I see things like this that today look like fantasies will become the norm one day, and it has. Virtual is here. No, it's not here to say. No, I'm not here to make a case, but this is now our current world. And it's just going, the direction of travel is very clear where it's going. So I think the technology, as it gets better, will allow for different types of exchanges. And the real physical presence, I believe, will be a very premium thing, therefore will be priced differently. Where I think I see a future where the digital presence of shows being wider, but the physical presence being a more premium thing that happens at a very unique, let's say, set of, let's say, parameters.
And we've already seen that change happen on a bigger scale. I know that Sophie Holt, Explory, and Adam Ford, Clarion Events, are speaking at UFI today around not having one. Clarion's changed their whole remit from not just being one annual trade show for each event brand, but what does your customer need, and letting those customers lead. And I don't know if you've seen the same sort of trends with Grip, and what your future you're seeing with your customers.
Yeah, of course. So I think that to that point, it's the entire customer journey that that you look at. And what I mean with a customer journey, it's the interaction between a visitor and exhibitor as part of a sales cycle. Previously, an organizer maybe did one touch point within that, which is the physical show. And now what they can do is take up a much bigger part of that customer journey. They can facilitate an initial exchange of content, right? Like something to learn, and then it goes down a next level where there is some initial conversation that might be virtually, and then it might convert into an in-person meeting, and there might be a follow-up conversation. So there are so many different touch points that the organizer can now add value, that if this hybrid strategy, which I think is a big part of 2020, and that's really where a lot of the emphasis is going to lie, of like, who can figure that out best? Who creates a great template for what a hybrid strategy means? And hybrid is not an event type. Hybrid is a strategy. I think that's really, really important. But yeah, I think that if you can figure that out, that's going to be a big part of 2022.
I love the idea of designing an event. I mean, who do you design for your event? Do you design them for exhibitors? Do you design them for visitors? Is this something that you talk around a lot with your business Precision, or is it more?
Well,
when you talk about event design and virtual event in the virtual space.
First of all, we are doing virtual only. That's our business, where our strategy lies, because we are doing events that are very global. It is not possible to do them physically. We get people logging in from all around the world to some of the events that we're doing. So with that, we are always designing. We have different audiences. Some of them don't pay, some of them pay, but that's not the way we look at who is our customer. We see all of them are customers, yeah? Some of them pay with their time, some of them pay with their money. So it doesn't make a difference for us. So they're all customers. So every customer type needs to be happy. And if you make just one of them happy and the other unhappy, you're going to run out of runway. You need to make sure that you design your event for all customer segments that you're servicing. However different their needs might be, you need to find the intersection between those specific needs that they might have. And we all know, all organizers here know that the better you are at finding out what that intersection is, the better your business will perform.
Getting back to the data and being able to track the whole cycle and using those VSEF and the data formats, the benchmarking and comparisons with other events and other industries or other events within your own industry, that's going to have massive benefit for, especially in the virtual space, right? Because you can actually measure the success. Is that something that your customers are keen to do? Do they ask you?
Yeah.
How does that compare?
No, definitely. Like, organizers are constantly asking us, how does this compare to the benchmark? Are we like top 10%? Are we like, where do we rank? Like, so definitely we have a whole slide pack, which is all the benchmarks across every single part. And we're starting to, I'd love to kind of make that into a dashboard where an organizer can see immediately like, hey, this is how my event ranks. And I think that actually a big part of setting standards is about finding this intersection of the different participant profiles really, and what their goals are, and whether your event is positioned to satisfy that intersection. And so a lot actually, what I see is the potential of this kind of standardization across data and being able to benchmark that is becoming better at almost having let's say you're sitting a month before the event, right? Adam is sitting here a month before Event Tech Live, and he's able to see in some type of dashboard an event health score, and it says, based on the people that have registered so far, this is the likelihood that people are going to be satisfied with the content, the networking, and the overall experience. And you can get that type of insight and benchmarking across other shows. That's what we could do as an organizer if you had much more standardization and data available in a single format. Because that's really, really interesting, because then you can start saying, okay, the show is maybe not on that intersection. What can we do to bring it to that intersection? Which audience do we need to bring to the show? Who do we need to market to? Which exhibitors are maybe not going to be happy based on what I'm currently looking at? So you need to constantly be looking for that intersection. And I think data lies at the very core of being able to do that in a scalable way.
I'd just like to, we'll go to questions in a minute, but I'd just like to ask you, on the wider topic of virtual events, and obviously COVID's rapidly increased adoption for many reasons, but sustainability, we would be amiss not to mention COP26. Is sustainability going to fuel the next generation, the next wave of virtual events?
Can I take that?
That's probably quite a big question.
Take it.
Yeah, I used to be one of the founding members of the UFI's Sustainability Committee, by the way. And I remember a meeting in Paris where we were talking about stuff like this 10 years ago. Yeah? And there was a very important slide that Michael Duck, current UFI president, showed us from a breakdown of an event in Hong Kong. And that picture was like, there was a bulldozer in a big hole tearing down stands. And unfortunately, since the 10 years that passed, not much has changed. Yeah? And I think people are going to be more and more conscious about the way they look at their personal carbon footprints, because we stopped traveling for 2 years and we didn't die. Yeah? So now we know that we can actually mitigate some of the travel via virtual attendance to some stuff. It could be events, it could be other things, it could be a meeting, it could be something else. So we now have an option in our back pocket saying, hey, do I really need to fly to this, or can I just do it virtually? And I think there was a paradigm shift as well, that when we receive an invitation, I did as well a few times in the past few months, I received an invitation to speak. I said, is it virtual or do I have to come? Because I thought immediately it was going to be virtual anyway. So it was a surprise. Oh, okay. So the thing is, this ability to choose between do I attend in person or not is new. It used not to be there because every meeting was a face-to-face meeting. Yeah. Now you have an option to say, oh, I'm going to be virtual here, in person there. So that will give you an ability to really look at your own personal schedule on how do I fly, what do I do, and it will give, it will set a standard for the visitor to not be at every event anymore, physically at least. And that is going to be where we will see a lot of, let's say, a reset of our turnouts. And we will be looking at combined turnouts very soon, let me tell you, and how that really translates into savings in actual travel involved and the setting up of stands and other things. So I think a more conscious and a more able visitor type is coming, and we need to prepare for that.
I think that it's very, I mean, you're completely right, and impressive that you were involved so early on. It's great. I think that I saw Web Summit. I saw a photo of Web Summit this week, and there were, I think, 45,000 people or something that went there. I think what we're going to see is that the real kind of hallmark shows, the kind of the key shows in an industry, I think people will fly there. They'll do all their in-person meetings there, and that's actually really efficient, right? As opposed to flying all over Europe. I go here, I go to UFI, and I can do a lot of meetings, and then I don't have to go to 20 different cities across Europe, which is great. So I think that's actually where the return on time and the return on kind of carbon emissions of events can actually be quite good. But I think any other experience will be very local, like small roundtables, breakfasts that are really city specific. And then everything in between, I think, will be predominantly virtual. So I think you kind of have sort of a kind of inverse relationship, very small in person, because it creates relationships through city specific, neighborhood specific, and then really big will stay in person because it's a great return on time. I think in between that, you're going to see a lot more virtual, and that will cut out a lot of in-person shows that just won't be able to take those top spots.
And it will drive organisers to provide that quality. It's going to see a revolution in our live events, because we've got to make something valuable enough for people to come back out, especially the younger audiences, because younger people vote with their feet. If they don't like what's happening with the planet, they become vegan. They take steps themselves to do that. So I think there'll be a change in designing events for the future and bearing that in mind. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Conscious of time.
Yep. Great session. You covered a lot of topics that I personally have written a lot of questions about. So, however, we've got a few that have come through online, and I think this comes through back to the sort of setting standards side of things. The first one is, aren't you talking about a one API concept for the events industry to promote interoperability and innovation?
Shall I take it, Tim? So I think that...
Sounded technical anyway.
Yeah. So an API stands for application programming interface.
I'm really glad you took that one.
And so it's basically one way to exchange data between two systems. But it's just one way. Like, a CSV or an Excel file, or, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you could exchange data between two programs. So, like, of course, an API is one that we're all familiar with, and, we know broadly what it does. But it's just one of the many ways that you can exchange data between systems. It would be great if there was a standardized API kind of structure that people could adopt to, but that's not always possible. Like, I think that as long as you go actually a little bit more detailed, well, the API structure might be slightly different. So, maybe if you register for a trade show, it's like a different format in the registration system used here than when it's for a small kind of roundtable event. So it might be completely different kind of logic to it. But as long as the fields and the overall the overall interface actually is similar, that's really important. And then if for the next event I just want to do a CSV import, that's good too. If the format is the same, that's completely fine. It doesn't need to be limited to one form of technology.
So maybe following that, for the non-techies in the room, so it might be the event manager that is not technically minded but produces amazing events. Like, what does this actually mean for them? What is this simplification of data process effectively? What does it mean for the person doing the job?
Currently, when you want to import people into your MailChimp account, for example, probably everybody's interacted with MailChimp. The thing you have to do when you import your data is you have to pick every single column, and it does some fuzzy logic that it does. A couple of them are matched automatically. What if all of them were matched automatically with 100% accuracy every single time you used MailChimp or any other marketing automation system? And that is what we're trying to do for the events industry. That if you are exporting something from any of the companies that you see here, and you're uploading it to any of the other companies that that are here, that it goes without failing. That would be very, very nice.
I've actually got a live an application of that. I was brought in as a consultant for a very, very senior company who were looking to acquire a very big company. And they were lots of Oxbridge, very talented consultants standing around for an entire day trying to work out why data they had from the same event changed over years. They couldn't understand it. All these different spreadsheets, all these different formats, and they couldn't understand it. And I just looked over and went, "Oh, because that's visit by GES, and that was CVent." And they were like, "Oh," and because they didn't know, but actually that wouldn't have even been a problem if
Matt wouldn't know anything about it, right?
I couldn't fix that one.
I chose two of the companies that weren't actually involved, but the same applies. It's.
No, absolutely. Okay, so the next question that has come through online is, what is the minimum data model that is common to different events? Which objects, users, views, time spent, any existing schema?
Can I take that? If you go to the VSAF website today, you can download the format for free. It's there, it's open. Just download it, have a look at it. We got the minimum fields that has been approved by 14 of the top 20 organizers there. Have a look at it. It's not a definitive list, but it's a good starting point. And that's what the version 1 of the format will support. And we'll keep on adding to it and perhaps iterating towards a better, more complete view of KPI indicators or data fields for the industry. But I would start by looking at what's available today on the VSAF website for free.
So I'm going to test you on this one. What is the website?
vsaf.io.
So nice and easy to find that information. Okay, the next one I think is really interesting. That it's pre-pandemic. I think a lot of traditionally the reg companies, for example, would kind of hold that data maybe as their power play. So they're trying to get other platforms to integrate and so on. A lot of reg companies like this is where we make our money. Not that we're going to make it hard, but it probably was hard. So the question about how do you motivate a platform to play the game when data opacity is key retention component of business models? I mean, the whole last 18 months, I think that's been turned on its head. I hope that's been turned on its head, but what do you guys think?
So I think that, first of all, the landscape has shifted. So if you came here 2 years ago, you'd have noticed that the biggest exhibitors are registration companies. Now the biggest exhibitors are engagement platforms, because that's where the majority of the user experience takes place now. And really what that means is that those platforms hold the majority of the data, and the registration is just a feed into those platforms. I think that the interoperability element of it, and how do you kind of incentivize platforms, I think that actually it will naturally happen as innovation increases. So what you see in most industries, you see best of breed, then you see a period where there is like a consolidation argument, and then there is a next step, which is, okay, actually, we're never going to be able to innovate in all these different areas, so we need to see best of breed well integrated. That's always the final outcome. If you look at any industry, that's where you eventually end up, and I think that that's kind of what we're working towards. I think over time, what you'll start seeing is that some platforms say, I just can't compete with what this very specific company is doing. Like Lineup Ninja is a very small company, 2 people. They've got the best speaker management tool. It's incredible. It's great.
I think Joe's going to come and give you a hug afterwards. No, it's
that's
amazing.
That's not socially distanced.
Yeah, sorry.
But you know, like, you could be a really big company, but you can't compete with somebody that is so good and doing just that one thing. And I think that that's like the basis for why a common data standard is so important, because that is going to enable all of these little companies to Barris's point, to democratize access and innovate. And so I think that over time you'll see that somebody that has taken a more open approach and say, actually, we're going to integrate with all these different companies and follow a certain standard, they're going to win, because the more different companies that come into this space, if we sit here next year, I can guarantee that there is going to be more innovative, small little companies that have come up over the coming 12 months that weren't there to start with. And that is going to mean that you can't compete with all of those. That means that you have to integrate, and as a result, you're going to want to do that effectively.
Definitely. Okay, there's, I think, time for one more, maybe 2, but this is about analytics, and I think we're talking about standardization. And again, of a traditional event, you know, for exhibitor ROI, for example, it was very much, you know, how many leads did you get? That was the main measurement a few years ago. What sort of metrics should people be looking for now, especially when it comes to virtual or hybrid or in person? What's kind of maybe some top tip key metrics that people should be looking at, Baris?
What came out in the organizer meetings that we held as, okay, what do we actually want to measure? It came out, the strongest was the number of meetings held, because that is beyond, let's say, leads generated. Yeah, that's business conducted. And then it goes at the meeting acceptance rates, because that is a very important component around how active is your user base, and also how people feel. If their meetings don't get accepted, you feel bad. Yeah, so that is also an important thing. And we have centered around many other things as well, like turn-up rate, attendance rate, lots of other things. But those 2, the number 1 that came out was number of meetings held, and the acceptance rate were very important to lots of organizers.
Fantastic. There is time for one more quick question of how easy is it for multiple platforms to integrate with one another? Can this be confusing for the end user? Try and answer that in 30 seconds. Maybe Tim.
Yes, that can be confusing, and I think EventTech Live is a good example of it. There is a lot of different technologies that you're all using as part of the show, and it isn't always easy to make sure that they work together well. And you know, that's a continued focus for the platforms amongst each other, is to create integrations that scale over a longer period of time as opposed to being event specific. I think that the most important thing that you can do as an organizer is have a clear plan and strategy over multiple years, that you say, these 2 technologies, I want to work with you both for the upcoming X amount of shows, and I want to make sure that they work well together. Go and figure that out. Like, as opposed to saying, hey, in a month before a show, I just want it for this show and we'll see afterwards if it worked or not. Like, I think the long-term perspective is super important in order to make sure that platforms take a long-term view and therefore build quality integrations between each other.
Yeah, I think great answer, Tim. And I think you said it early on in the conversation of hybrid is a strategy, not an event type. So I think you're absolutely right with that. So I'd like to round of applause, please, for Katie from 5283, Tim from GRIP, and Dr. Baris from Precision Communities.